Good morning again. This is Jerry Godero. I'm with Contex Americas, and thank you all for coming. I'm here with Dan Bennett, also from Contex. Hi, Dan.
Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning. And we're here for some large format scanner, Contex scanner, like a Ask the Experts Q&A session. And so Dan, we got a question just recently submitted from Ariel Fiken. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they were asking about how well do the Contex scanners scan highlighted color? That they had an HP scanner and it wouldn't pick up any highlighter mark.
All right, that's actually a really good question. The biggest reason probably the HP was having some issues with highlighter marks. Fluorescents, yellows, the type of thing are really difficult. Sometimes the oranges will come out brown, that type of thing with highlighter marks, is because the scanner that was with the HP was most likely a CIS scanner. And CIS elements do have difficulties reaching out into those fluorescent type highlighter colors. On the Contex side of things, we do have a CCD based scanner called the HD Ultra X. CCDs have a very different ability to be able to capture those types of color spaces. And so I think your best go-to solution would be a CCD based scanner if you are delving into highlighters and that type of thing. We've made quite a bit of progress in the latest CIS scanners to be able to see those areas, but they are still pretty difficult to capture. So I would say if that was on your hit list of things that are really a requirement for selecting a scanner, stick with CCD. So the HD Ultra X would be the scanner of choice there in the Contex suite of scanners.
Gotcha. And I think with most markups and highlighting drawings, we usually see just the yellow highlighter, but are there any other colors that, the blue, the orange, the pink that are equally, they're all the same trouble, or are there some that kind of turn out a little better than others?
There's a lot of different highlighters out there, and they're all a little bit different. The fluorescents are really where you have to be careful. So often blues will come in okay, but I have seen a couple of blues that, for whatever reason, the ink that they used in that particular highlighter pen had a brighter hue to it.
Oh, gotcha.
And that seemed to be an issue. Often pinks and oranges often will come in, but they'll be a different shade.
Yeah,
especially with the fluorescent orange.
I was just going to say that orange kind of you end up kind of with a brown mark on the drawing sometimes.
Yeah, almost a maroonish kind of color. It almost goes to muddy brown, but yeah, it's the lighting system in a CIS element is not real friendly when it comes to fluorescence. So
gotcha. And this may kind of go into that a little bit, but there's another question asking about, do all the large format scanners in the market come with a dedicated black channel?
I can't speak for all of them, but the Contex scanners, we chose a quad linear CCD. So it's red, green, blue, and then a separate panchromatic channel that's specifically for scanning black and white and gray tone images. Often, that is one of the areas that will differentiate between different vendors out there that are, making scanners. where they'll use trilinear CCD. They drop the panchromatic channel, and then they basically just do a conversion, often either through a mix of the RGB channels, or they'll pick just one single channel like the green channel and convert that back into gray tone. And the issue with that, and the problem with that, is it is a filtered channel. So the way RGB works is, if you want a green channel, then you're going to filter out the red and the blue channel light spectrum. So those photons of light won't get to the CCD. And so when you do that, that filtering can have adverse effects on just a regular gray tone document that you want to scan. And so we use a separate channel just for panchromatic, and all of that filtering has been removed. So you get a much better image using a separate panchromatic channel. So the short answer is no, everyone doesn't do that. There are some other vendors that may not use a panchromatic channel, and that is something that you would want to look at on a spec sheet to make sure that you're buying a quad linear CCD scanner.
And I think where I was tying it back a little bit to that previous question is that dedicated black channel that gives us that really nice grayscale, even if you're not scanning in color, I think if you're scanning in grayscale, a lot of times I've seen where that highlighted marker is still at least picked up with our Contex scanners, whereas some other scanners in grayscale, that highlighted mark is just kind of gone.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And typically the way to eliminate that, if you're scanning gray tone, not just straight black and white, would be to set a white point setting down below the threshold of where that highlighter marking was. Okay. So it converts it to pure white. The catch with that is the more you filter, the less you potentially could get from the image in saving artifacts that you want to keep. And so you may nicely eliminate the highlighter lines in gray tone, but then you also lost some other pieces of the document that you wouldn't want to.
Gotcha. Away go the dash dotted lines and things, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then let's see. So there's another question about features in Nextimage that are best for repetitive actions like batch scanning and things like that. Now, what features in Nextimage are best for repetitive batch scanning? Sorry, it's a little more clear.
Well, I would say batch scanning is, if you could tag one feature in Nextimage for batch scanning, or for repetitive scanning, I should say, is batch scanning. But within batch scanning, there are some other features that come to my mind right away. And that would be, for example, within a batch, you can auto file name.
Yeah.
So, and not only can you do just an auto file name by, say, an incremental counter. So for example, you could have a document called image, and the next one will be image 2, image 3, and so on down the path. You can get very, very creative and add tags to your file names. And these can be inserted into any location within the name. So for example, if you wanted to include the operator's name that's logged into the PC, you can include that in the file name. You can do just all kinds of different things. You can put a date stamp, you can include multiple tags within that file name. So you could have like image 003 incrementally, and then maybe at the prefix of all that, have a date stamp or an operator's name, right, or whatever else. So there's a whole variety of different things that we've added in there. And these are the features that you're not going to find on a spec sheet, but they're really powerful tools to be able to give you the customization that you want. And it's very similar to, like a quad linear CCD. We don't heavily promote the fact that we use quad linear CCDs, but that panchromatic channel is really, really important. So wherever the weakest link is, that's really going to place limitations on the scanner. And Contex has always kind of pushed the envelope of trying to put out as many features and as many benefits to give you the most productivity that you can. So,
Sure.
so back to batch scanning, repetitive. The whole idea with batch scanning is we don't want the user to interact with the software once the batch is started. So the idea is select a preset, have all of your nice filters that you want to use for this particular batch, have the auto file naming set up for you. And then at that point, all you're doing is focusing on running paper through that scanner. Your attention now is off the screen and focused on the scanner. And so those are the things that really make repetitive scanning much faster, much more productive, and much easier on the operator, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, and what you were saying about one of those features being in our auto naming, one of the things I think is great is that, like you said, you can add, there's a whole list of different options for putting in operator name, time date stamps, things like that, and incremental counters and things. But if you don't want to set up just a numbering 1, 2, 3 to up to 9,000 or something like that, but you have a nice unique identifier like the logged in operator and a time date stamp that's giving you down to the second. So one of the things you also have is a very easy, unique file naming, but you can also look at whole projects in kind of a, in a hovered view, and you can see exactly the productivity by the hour. You can see how many scans are kind of going through by the hour, by the day, and by the operator, and which operator might be getting more productivity than others. And you can analyze and see what that person might be doing as opposed to some of the other team members, and see what you can do to step that process up. And that's something that can just be found right in the way that you auto name the file.
And that brought to mind another feature that we haven't even discussed yet, and that's a built-in accounting system within Nextimage.
Right.
Again, we don't talk a lot about this, but it will literally, if you enable accounting, you can set it up by a job number, for example, and it will track everything that's run through that scanner, whether it's a scan or a copy, and it will track all that information, the date stamp, the file size, the file type, the file dimensions, what type of file it was it a color or black and white, which operator scanned it. All of that information is generated in a CSV file that you can import easily into Excel and do calculations on total square foot scanned, and really start to bring out a bigger picture of what's happening with that particular scanner.
Yeah, that's a great Nextimage feature that's well underutilized,
Yeah, it's something that's so easily overlooked, and so powerful.
Right. And I think even setting it up is simply almost like a checkbox, and then you go back to the information later.
Right. Yeah. Once you enable it, it's just a checkbox of enable accounting or disable it, and then it also gives you an option to put in a job number so that you can identify which particular job that the accounting is tracking to, or you can just leave it wide open and it'll track everything that happened during that day.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so we've got a question about, it seems like Nextimage is the theme today. So how does Nextimage work with third-party software like WiseImage? And WiseImage is a raster-to-vector conversion software that we've had dealings with for over the years.
Yeah, so WiseImage is actually pretty a unique product. It's very much integrated into the scanner itself, so that you're not having to bounce in and out of the application. So Nextimage is a really powerful scanning tool, and we've identified that Nextimage is for scanning, and a lot of these other wonderful tools out there, they do what they do best, but we stick to the scanning side with Nextimage. So where WiseImage comes in is, let's say you want to take raster information, which is the way the scanner captures the data. Raster meaning a series of little dots, and then vectorize them so that maybe you can bring it into a CAD program like AutoCAD. And WiseImage is an amazing tool to be able to create, either in a fully automated method, convert the raster to a vectored environment. It allows you to rubber band and scale and do all of these really cool tools. But basically, it's using something similar to Twain, but much more robust, where you scan the image and then it's just provided to you within WiseImage. And if I remember, Jerry, you may know this better than I, but WiseImage actually had a scan engine built in within itself as well. But
they did. I mean, I believe they used our SDK to write that in there so they could have as good as possible. But I think that CSoft had also said, it's almost best to get the drawing scanned in Nextimage and then processed through in WiseImage.
Right, which seems to be kind of the highest productivity method of doing these things. Get your documents scanned and then post-process each scan using whatever utility that you want.
I think what they and some of the others find out is that when they kind of design their own scanning tool, which we give them all the ability to do that, it's not everything, that we've really dialed in with Nextimage. And with a product like WiseImage, you're working with problem drawings that need corrections. So you really want that scan engine that's gonna really get that image looking the best as possible prior to a post-process raster edit or raster-to-vector conversion or anything like that.
Yeah, we used to scan topography maps with bring them into WiseImage, and then you could take and rubber band scale off of known points on the topo and be able to rescale it perfectly, because often paper isn't to scale any longer.
Sure.
And
those are those great tools that we just don't have in Nextimage that a product like WiseImage would do, and that just a 4-point rubber sheeting using the frame of a scanned architectural drawing, or something as advanced as what you were just talking about, which is actually taking and laying out, straightening a drawing based on the grid, squaring out the grid pattern on a topographic map, and then laying that back over a printed, corrected drawing over the original, and seeing that, those points are just perfect. Everything is right back to square.
Right. Yeah. So we kind of went down a rabbit.
Yeah, sorry.
A rabbit hole.
As far as how Nextimage works with a third-party software.
So the short answer to that is Nextimage is kind of the front end of getting images into the computer that then WiseImage can pick up and manipulate.
Or another, whether it's WiseImage or whether you're working in Photoshop or any of those things. And Photoshop, I think, is a good example because there's a Twain scanning driver in there, and it can utilize our Nextimage Twain driver and run a Contex scanner, if I'm not wrong. But still, I think if you're doing detailed things, you want to take a nice scanned image that came through Nextimage and then bring it into Photoshop to do a pixel alignment or tiling or whatever it is that you need to do there.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned Twain. Twain is a wonderful tool for like one-off type environments where you need an image into Photoshop. So you have Photoshop up on your screen and you just go File, Import, Nextimage Twain. It launches a kernel of Nextimage. Allows you to change the settings. You scan. Once the scan's completed, the Nextimage screen kind of just disappears and you're left in Photoshop with the image that you just scanned. So that's nice on a one-off, but it's really not a high productivity type environment because now you're doing one image, one manipulation in Photoshop and you're done. You're much better off scanning. If you have, say, 50 documents to scan, get all your scanning done first, and then bring them into Photoshop as a post-process operation.
Gotcha. And so now our next question is, again, Nextimage. So it's asking about Nextimage and if it has an oversized document wizard, and what does that do?
This sounds really interesting because I think we got this question last month, and I answered it a little differently. So I answered it based on the emphasis being on a scanner. So we have a IQ Flex, and it has an oversizing feature built in within it with its internal controller. So Nextimage has the same wizard. It looks quite different because it's running on a PC instead of internally on this computer.
The little controller,
scanner controller
on the
scanner. What I'm
scanner.
trying to say. But Nextimage has the same wizard. So if you wanted to scan, you have a flatbed scanner that's B size, and you want to scan a D size document. You start this oversized wizard by selecting a larger sheet than it knows is available for that particular scanner, and it will start the wizard. And basically all it does is it prompts you on screen how to position the document, scan it, and then how to reposition it so you can get the rest of the document, scan it, and then it does an auto stitch where it stitches the two halves together basically for you.
Because with that particular, the IQ Flex, it's a certain size, and it's going to do an oversize, it's going to need to make multiple scans, right? It's got at least 2 passes. Is that
right? Yep. Yeah, with flatbeds, you're limited on glass size basically, where with a roll-fed scanner, if you have something really large, you can just keep feeding it through the scanner. It just, it'll take a long 200-foot roll, for example, and scan the whole thing.
so? And this one actually looks like a follow-up to something we were talking about last month as well. And it's asking, how can Nextimage enlarge a document without pixelization?
Yeah,
I think we were talking about how that's a great tool in it, that you use the scaling in Nextimage and it automatically does the resampling for you. Whereas with a lot of other applications, including WiseImage, which is a very powerful raster image manipulator, you can't just stretch out the frame and resize the drawing. You have to resample the image and all those things. But Nextimage seems to kind of tackle all of that in one stroke.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. One geared towards copying and the other geared towards scanning. So in the copy world, so you're taking an image and you're wanting to output it to some print device. That's done using many of the same tools, but then we run it through what we call a RIP, which is built into our copy solution within Nextimage. And really the magic happens in the RIP, which is raster image processing. And that's where you can take something fairly small and blow it up quite large and not see any degradation in scan quality. So that's all done through a RIP, and it's pretty proprietary, so we won't get into too much detail on how it happens. But on the scan side, there's an interesting thing because it's often people think that they need to scan at really high resolution to prevent pixelization and those types of things when they start to blow something up large. And that really is only true when you're scanning very small originals. So if you were scanning, say, a 5x7 photo and you wanted to blow it up 800%, you're going to see that pixelization if you're not scanning at a very high resolution. But I think where people get confused is if you're scanning a D-size document, 24x36, you can scan it at 200 to 300 DPI and really blow that thing up if you want with no degradation because you're already starting off so large. But in addition to that, then we have a lot of software filters that just kind of run behind the scenes. Things like the smoothen filter, which basically is a filter that blurs large background, geographic background of similar colors into a nice, smooth look. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't manipulate anything around a line. So what we're trying to do is prevent the lines from blurring. So we're keeping the lines
smooth.
nice and sharp, but we're smoothing out all the background noise and whatnot. That's a super appealing filter. And you can use it in conjunction with sharpening as well. So you can add a little sharpen filter that crispens up the lines, smooths out the background, fills like the oceans and whatnot if you're scanning a map, and gives you the best of both worlds. But those types of things really reduce pixelization. And then there's one more factor that we have to include in this, and that's file compression. So file formats such as PDF and JPEG use a lossy file format compression algorithm. And what that means is it takes, to get you nice, small, tight files in file sizes, it takes a lot of data and kind of just chunks it together into blocks. And you'll see that again in areas that have a lot of fill areas, because you'll start to see where one color will kind of shift slightly. So if you're having those types of issues, you want to use a lossless file format such as TIFF. And even PDF now allows you to do compression without any, well, you can take JPEG and take it down to 0 as well. But it's the same idea. Now you're not getting tight files as far as file sizes, but you get these really nice, clean, unfiltered, undoctored images.
So do JPEG and PDF use the same LZW compression that you're saying you can take that down to 0 and have an uncompressed PDF?
Actually, PDF uses JPEG as a compression routine typically. LZW is another compression that is lossless, and TIFF, for example, allows you to go TIFF uncompressed. If you do use a compression, typically LZW is going to give you the most bang for your buck, but it's lossless. So the algorithm does it quite differently so that you don't end up with these big areas of data manipulation that happens. It's doing it all mathematically, but it doesn't convert any data when it does it. So it leaves everything intact. It just tries to squeeze the file as much as it can.
Gotcha. And all those things come together to assist in Nextimage kind of blowing up that file to make it, nice and smooth and crisp, and, without having to have it scanned at 9600 DPI or something ridiculous that, is a file size your computer probably can't even handle.
Yeah, I think I took that way too far. As far as making it complicated to answer, we got a little too technical on that. But the bottom line is those are the things that really will affect the document, unbeknownst to you. I mean, I had that come in as a technical support question just last week.
Gotcha. So you were locked and loaded.
Yeah, you had this big gray area, and the gray wasn't consistently gray across the whole thing, and it was because of the JPEG compression messing with it.
Right. But I think a great point that you make is that in scanning something with the intention that you're going to blow it up, scanning it to a large format already at 200 to 300 DPI and then increasing that size, you just don't have to, unless it's very small, like you said, you don't need to do that super high resolution 600 DPI or higher scan just to make a nice poster or something like that out of a smaller map or, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think in a typical application, like in reprographics or whatnot, the common scenario is I've got a D size, but I want to blow it up to E size so they can draft over the top of it and have more space. That's just, you don't need a lot of resolution, and you're not going to get any pixelization when you do that type of scaling, even on screen. So
Gotcha. And then, like you were saying with the RIP, if you're taking a nice photograph and you're blowing it up to a poster, that's kind of doing it through Nextimage on the raster image processor side, on the print side, rather than
Correct.
on the image scaling side.
I
So
think where a
either way.
lot of us forget is when you're in a PC and you start zooming into a document, it's so easy to zoom in and out these days that you kind of lose track of just how far you zoomed in. And you're looking at something, you go, well, that doesn't look right, and then you realize, oh, I just zoomed in 1200%. You're looking at a tiny millimeter size area.
Right.
You're like, well, no wonder why it looks, I can see every dot now.
Right. Well, I think, let's see, unless we have any other questions from our nice audience members, we're right on a half an hour or so. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up for today. And thank you all for coming. And Dan, thank you very much for being our scanning expert today.
It's always my pleasure.
And we'll be talking to everybody soon. Have a great day, all.